I thought about something the other day that I thought might be fun to talk about. You hear a lot on YouTube about YouTubers' favorite fish foods that they like to feed to their fish, but what you don't hear a lot about is the brands themselves. How the brands operate, all of the experiences with these brands and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, you know what, that could be a video. So let's talk about it and see how it comes out. I don't know. Could be a lot of fun. We'll talk about what we know about the history of these brands, our experiences with the brands and our experiences with the foods when we feed them, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It sounds like an interesting topic to me. So let's do it. Let's talk about the most popular aquarium fish food brands that you're going to find out there. And I just have to tell you this one thing. These are not in any particular order. I'm not going to do these of best to worst or anything like that. No, we're just going to talk about them in a random order. Okay, let's start this off by talking about two brands that I believe are the largest in the industry. And I am going to take Hikari on this one. I don't know a ton about the company. I do know that they've made fish food for like 150 years, and it's made in Japan. What I do know is this is a brand that's everywhere. It's in every big box store, mom and pop pet stores, and you can even find it at Walmart and other grocery stores. You can't go anywhere without seeing Hikari. To a lot of stuck-up fish keepers, this is a bad thing, but to me, the reason you see it everywhere is, well, it's a really good product. Before Hikari, fish food was just fish food, a generic formula to feed every kind of fish you see in an aquarium, but Hikari came along and started making specific formulas for specific fish like goldfish, cichlids, and algae eaters. They have everything from flakes, pellets, and freeze-dried foods, even frozen foods. This brand is one of the OGs and obviously one of the biggest, and unfortunately, that leads to certain issues. The first is when a brand gets that big, people assume they got that way by using inferior ingredients and making their foods as cheap as possible. I disagree with this completely and have found their products to be stellar for as long as I've been around. In fact, the very first foods I ever bought were cichlid gold for my Oscars and jumbo carnosticks for my arowanas. That was in 1993 and the company was already over 100 years old by then. But the second challenge a company has when they get as big as Hikari is the fish snobs that have their thumb up their butts complaining that their food is just trash because it's so accessible. These are the same people that would say, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady suck. There are people that struggle to accept greatness simply because of their bias. They think that because they don't like a product, it must be bad. Don't listen to these idiots. You don't get to be as big as Hikari by offering a bad product, just like you don't win 6 Super Bowls like Bill Belichick or 7 like Tom Brady by being bad at football. Hikari makes a great product. I still feed it to a lot of my fish to this day, and I'm gonna continue to feed that food forever. Those idiots that talk about Bill and Tom not being the best are probably the same ones that will not acknowledge that Michael Jordan is the best basketball player of all time. Get out of here with that nonsense.
Tetra hasn't been around as long as Hikari, but they claim to be the largest aquarium fish food manufacturer in the world. Are they? I don't know, but they are pretty huge. Tetra is the brand that developed the first flake food for fish. Obviously, this would have been a game changer for the industry when it happened. Are they really the ones that made the first flakes? Well, I have no idea, but that's what they claim. If it wasn't them, I'm not sure who it would have been. Tetra is another example of a brand that you shouldn't assume to be bad just because they're so big. Most likely you've used some of their products in the past, or maybe you are now. This is one of those brands that a lot of new fish keepers start off with, and they're actually pretty good, so you shouldn't poo-poo them.
Okay, this is a brand that if I was putting a list together of my favorite fish foods, it would be at the top of the list. Northfin. You want reasons? Oh, I've got reasons aplenty. First is their dedication to using the best possible ingredients, no matter the cost. Many manufacturers will use an inferior ingredient because they might save 3 cents per pound of food. Not this company. It's the best or it doesn't go in the food. I happen to know the owner of this company personally, and to hear him talk about fish food ingredients is like having a conversation with a kid talking about their favorite video game. I don't mean that like he talks like a child. I'm saying he talks about it with the same level of enthusiasm. It is absolutely hilarious. His philosophy is if I use the absolute best ingredients like whole Antarctic krill, herring, kelp, all of those amazing ingredients, it's going to create a better product for the customer's fish. So what if I make a few cents less per pound? And here's another thing I bet you didn't know. When Northfin foods are made in their facility in Toronto, guess who's making it? Is it an army of employees operating a warehouse full of huge machinery? Nope. It's the owner himself making small batches of food in an extruder that he designed and built himself. He creates the formula, puts everything into the machine, and makes all of the food himself. Tell me another major brand that's doing that. This is something that's particularly impressive to me because that's the same philosophy that Lisa and I live by. We don't have a couple of dozen employees running around doing all the work for us. It's too difficult to control quality and make sure our customers are taken care of. So for there to be a fish food brand that does the same things that Lisa and I do, oh boy, that is big points for us. But it's not just about the people behind the brand, it's the product itself. The ingredients they use make a huge difference, not just in the way the food is accepted by the fish, but also the effects it has on the fish, and even us. Yeah, I said us, and here's what I mean by that. Open up a bag of Northfin fish food, and believe it or not, it doesn't have that fish food smell. It actually smells really good. I'm not gonna eat it, but it smells good. A small business putting ingredients over profits and doing all of the work themselves rather than sitting behind a desk doling out commands, that is a win-win for me. Try the food and I promise you'll feel the same way.
Welcome to Storytime with Lisa. This is a good one. Back in the 1970s, there were two brothers, Rick and Andy Biro. These were two ambitious young guys that had a love for aquariums, especially these colorful fish found in Africa. The Biro brothers loved these fish so much they imported them into the United States, making them the first to import African cichlids and make them available to hobbyists. Fast forward a bit and they took their operation from their parents' basement to a massive farm in Homestead, Florida and created Florida Exotic Fish Sales. Their operation grew to a point where they were breeding and importing over 500,000 fish in this farm and they needed to have something to feed them. Well, in the decades that followed, they developed a formula that was suitable for all of the fish. It needed to not only be food the fish would eat, but it needed to make them happy and super healthy. Well, what ended up happening is these fish were so healthy and they looked so good that the fish stores were asking, what are you feeding these fish? Whatever it is, we want it. And that's when Extreme was born. Our personal introduction to Extreme was similar. When John and I had our fish store, we bought fish from Florida Exotic and they always came in super big and colorful, and our customers would say the same thing. Whatever you're feeding them is what we want. We had no choice but to give the customers what they wanted and carry Extreme. That was in 2013, and we've been a huge advocate for their fish food ever since. And in the last 10 years, they've come up with other formulas and they've been doing such an amazing job. When a product is good, it sells itself, which makes it a no-brainer for us. And when the fish are happy, healthy, and thriving, no one cares about a cool story. They just want the food. This is why we've had such a good relationship with them for years and why Extreme was one of the first foods we picked up to carry on our website. If I'm being totally honest with you, if all the other brands disappeared and there was only Extreme and Northfin left, we would be perfectly fine with that. and we would carry on business as usual.
New Life Spectrum, or NLS like I like to call it, is another one of those brands that you've probably seen in every single pet store you've been into. And there's good reasons. Fish thrive on their food, period. I've fed many different types of NLS foods over the years, and my fish have always done really well on it. Back when Lisa and I were breeding African cichlids in our garage and had to feed 127 tanks full of fish, we always had some NLS handy. Our fry grew fast, our breeders bred like crazy, and everyone was happy. What more needs to be said? Well, there's actually two things that need to be said. One is just based on my experience, and the other is what I've heard. So take it with a grain of salt. I don't know if it's just me or other fish keepers have experienced this too, but when I feed NLS food exclusively for a long time, I don't know if it's the dye that they use in the food or what, but there seems to become a red hue to the water. I guess they're using some kind of red dye in the food. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I certainly have. Let me know if I'm the only one and I'm just crazy. And the other thing is, and again, this is just something that I've heard, I don't know it to be fact, but what I've been told is the owner of NLS used to work at Florida Exotic Fish Sales when they were developing Extreme. And did he just go and take the Extreme formula with him and put red dye in it and call it NLS? I don't know. But if that's what happened, well, Lisa already told you how good Extreme is, so that would explain why NLS is so good. Again, I don't know if all this is true. I'm just telling you what I've heard. But either way, still a good food. Wait a minute, John and Lisa usually go back and forth. Why are we having to look at John twice? This is bullshit. Well, hold on there, Slugger. I wanted to let Lisa have the grand finale. Trust me, it'll all make sense. I can remember not too long ago when there was no such thing as fish foods made by Fluval. Or maybe they just represented such a small part of the industry, I didn't notice. But not long ago, they introduced something that took off like a freight train, and it completely changed the industry forever. Of course, I'm talking about bug bites. I don't know about you, but I had never heard about using black soldier fly larvae in fish foods. But when Fluval did that, I was like, oh, why couldn't I have been the one to discover that? It's an absolute no-brainer that fish would thrive on food made from bugs, since that's what so many of them eat in nature. Fish are constantly hovering around the surface waiting for a bug to land. My only question is, why didn't someone think of this 50 years ago? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe companies have been using insect larvae in their foods for however long. It was just never really made a big deal of until Fluval did it. I don't know. I'm not exaggerating when I say Fluval changed the fish food industry when they came out with bug bites. It was such a success that several other companies have made their versions of it, and yes, that even includes Northfin and Extreme. Northfin has Bug Pro, which we can't keep in stock because it sells so fast, and Extreme just came out with SoFly, and I gotta tell you, we have not found any fish that will not accept this food. It's as if Fluval found the holy grail of fish foods, and everybody else was like, oh, we gotta get in on that. But hey, that's what happens in business. Can't blame anyone for it.
Okay, this one isn't really a brand, it's a type of food. And it's something that we've used in our fish room forever. And that's just shrimp and fish from the grocery store. If John was doing this segment, he would tell you when he exclusively feeds frozen tilapia or frozen shrimp to his Oscar and biker tank, the fish seem the happiest. And there's much less mess in there. This would make sense because think about it. If you've ever been on a diet staying away from processed foods, I'm sure your bathroom habits changed in a big way. Well, this is the same thing for your fish. They're not eating any fillers or additives, just straight meat. Now listen, I'm not making the argument that processed fish foods are bad for your fish. I'd actually argue the opposite, because they're not bad. It's just a different way of feeding your fish. John's lifelong dream is to have an aquarium large enough to hold all of those fish that we argue shouldn't be kept in aquariums, like arapaima and red-tailed catfish. Well, can you imagine feeding a 6-foot-long arapaima pellets? I don't even think the fish would recognize that it's food. It would be like dust floating all around them. No, in a situation like that, you'd be dropping in whole fish or fish fillets. Now you might be thinking it would be super expensive to feed this way. Well, it can be if you're feeding 13-inch Oscars and 2-foot-long bikers entire shrimp, but if you have smaller fish, you can cut this up into tiny pieces, refreeze it, and have tons of food for the future. I just wouldn't feed it all the time unless you have those giant fish that can't eat anything else, because while the tank might be cleaner when John feeds it, the fish definitely look better when they're fed manufactured food.
So there you go. This was kind of fun, doing things a little bit differently, talking about these brands. I don't know. Yeah, I do have my biases on some of these brands, but most of these brands we're talking about here have been around for a very long time, and we have supported for a very long time, so it was very easy to talk about them. And hey, guess what? There's 3 more that we didn't include in this video. If you want to see our opinions on 3 more fish food brands, click the join button down below, become a channel member, where you're going to get an extra bonus video where we talk about 3 more brands. I'm not going to tell you who those brands are, but they are 3 big ones. So you're going to want to see that. Join up, become a channel member, and join us over there, and you'll have access to that video that most people do not. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. It really was a whole lot of fun to do. We look forward to seeing you again next week. See ya.